Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where armor jingles like wind chimes, velvet flows like melted butter, and horses look like they've been dipped in frosting and rhinestones. You're arriving not in your usual dreamscape, but at the gates of a medieval tournament, the Super Bowl of shiny things and fragile masculinity, where millionaire knights parade their warhorses with all the subtlety of a bridal boutique on fire. Trumpets are blaring, children are screaming. Someone's hawking roasted turnips on sticks, and for some reason, that scent mingles oddly with the rose oil drifting from a nearby stallion's mane. All around you, banners crack in the wind, scarlet, emerald, gold, cobalt, each one stitched with a knight's sigil, a family's legacy, and possibly the most extra embroidery budget you've ever seen. Your boots hit soft turf as you trudge into the grounds, dodging a lad hauling silver horseshoes on a velvet cushion. A group of nobles crowds around a particularly tall horse draped in seafoam silk and tassels, cooing as if it's a royal baby. It's not. It's Sir Tybalt's warhorse, Buttercup the Blood Stomper. He chose the color to bring out the green in his eyes, or so he says. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always amazed at where you guys are listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here to watch men try to kill each other for honor, sure, but also to silently judge the absurd, glittering, stupefyingly ornate horses they rode in on, because nothing screams "fear me in battle" quite like a hoof-polished mare draped in tangerine brocade with diamond-studded ear flaps. Everywhere you look, the horses are decked out like wedding cakes. Not modern wedding cakes either. We're talking those medieval ones stacked sky-high, crammed with sugar swans, tiny windows, and probably a moat. Some of these horses are wearing more layers than the queen on a bad laundry day. Ribbons trail like comet tails, bells jingle under their bellies, and there's at least one gelding with actual lace cuffs stitched onto his front knees. That's right, horse cuffs. For dignity. As you squeeze through the crowd, a knight in a feathered coif huffs past you, muttering curses about last-minute embroidery delays. You overhear that his seamstress fainted after sewing 2,000 freshwater pearls into his destrier's tail wrap. She woke up muttering something about needing a patron saint for wrist cramps. Historians still argue whether this level of horse bedazzling was meant for intimidation, theatricality, or just plain flexing. One chronicler claimed a knight's horse was once so lavishly dressed that it caused an actual traffic jam on the tilt yard. The stallion refused to move, allegedly distracted by its own reflection in a polished silver saddle plate. The sun's barely risen, and already you're drenched in conflicting smells: warm leather, baked onions, lilac hoof polish, and the faint but unmistakable tang of sweaty ambition. A group of squires passes by, carrying caparisons folded like fine tapestries. One whispers something about the aquamarine disaster of last spring, and everyone shudders in silence. You don't ask. The tournament itself doesn't even start until noon, but the real show is well underway. Horses preen as their handlers fluff, brush, and re-starch neck ruffles. You pause to admire a gelding wearing what can only be described as a chainmail corset. His knight insists it helps with posture and morale. The horse, meanwhile, stares at you with the dead eyes of someone who's seen too many runway rehearsals. Over near the stables, two noblemen bicker over plume height regulations. Apparently, one knight's ostrich feather contraption is obscenely vertical. The other insists it's merely majestic. Neither notices when a child throws a plum pit at the horse's rump. You stop by a tent lined with mirrors, where one particularly insecure baron is doing final touch-ups on his steed's eyeliner, made from crushed charcoal and beeswax. It's rumored that the right kind of eye contouring can make a horse look 10 years younger and half a hand taller. Among the crowd, you notice foreign guests, an Italian merchant squinting skeptically at the excess, a Saracen envoy quietly taking notes on saddle tassel engineering. You catch a whisper about Arabian horse decor being far more tasteful, and you're inclined to agree. And then, over the din, the trumpets sound again, this time deeper, slower. It's the opening signal. The gates to the arena creak open, and the horses begin filing in like a parade of sentient chandeliers, a shimmering procession of silks, metalwork, and painfully coordinated color schemes. Some horses even match their knight's eyes. Others match their knight's mothers. As the first lance is raised and the crowd holds its breath, you realize this isn't a joust. Not really. This is performance art, equestrian theater, a pageant of power, wealth, and utterly useless sequins. Somewhere behind you, a boy screams, "That horse has gold teeth," and you wonder if you've fallen asleep already. You're barely through marveling at the first glitter-cloaked horses when your eyes catch a particularly flustered knight standing beside his mount, holding two swatches of velvet like they're ancient scrolls. He's wearing full armor, minus the helmet, which is perched atop a stool like a second head, and arguing loudly with three women holding embroidery hoops. The cause of the debate? Whether damask plum looks too juvenile next to deep wine. You inch closer, curious. The knight notices and thrusts the velvet toward you. "Which one makes my destrier look more murderous?" he asks, dead serious. You say the wine and instantly regret it. His face crumples. "That's what she said," he groans, jerking a thumb at the oldest of the seamstresses, who shrugs like she's seen too many men spiral over fabric to care anymore. This, you're beginning to realize, is not about battle readiness. This is about drama, ego, and one-upmanship wrapped in brocade. Knights in this world are warriors, yes, but they're also performers, influencers, and overgrown schoolboys with access to gold mines. Their horses, four-legged canvases for expression, intimidation, and sometimes emotional instability. Your average knight's armor might cost the GDP of a fishing village, but his horse's look could run even higher. Tailors had to understand both fashion and equine anatomy. One wrong stitch under the belly strap, and Sir Boniface's battle steed might buck him into next week. You see one such fashion disaster unfold in real time. A young squire unveils a caparison, the elaborate drape that covers the horse's body, and the knight, a broad-shouldered man with a twisty mustache, screams. Not in rage, but in pure horror. "You made it, taupe," he gasps, staggering back like he's been slapped. The squire, pale and panicked, mutters that it was described as duskwood gray in the invoice. The knight drops to a barrel dramatically and wails, "My enemies will laugh before they fear me." Historians still argue whether knights truly believed this level of detail would affect their chances in combat, or if they simply needed something to control in a life filled with mud, plague, and pointy things. You spot another knight, Sir Lambert the Younger, demanding that his horse's saddle be padded with goose down instead of straw, because he heard it radiates nobility. A servant rolls his eyes and swaps the stuffing when Lambert isn't looking. The horse doesn't care. It's busy eating someone's ribboned glove. Down the line, Sir Gideon's gelding is getting its fetlocks braided with red silk. His mistress insists it represents courage. You're pretty sure it's just a trend. A few horses over, another knight, Sir Hugo the Elaborate, is having a full mental breakdown because his horse's chest covering doesn't sparkle in morning light. A boy with a tin of mica powder rushes in to fix it. You wonder how many people here are employed solely for sparkle management. In a quieter corner, a woman knight, Dame Isoria, inspects her steed's ensemble with a calm you find refreshing. Her destrier is wrapped in smoky indigo, with trim so black it seems to absorb the light. No fuss, no crying, just confidence and quiet terror. You want to root for her immediately. Her horse's only accessory. A single obsidian disc hanging from its bridle, carved with a rune nobody dares to ask about. Later, you'll hear 3 squires argue whether it wards off spirits, wins favor with mountain gods, or is just aesthetically ominous. The tournament ground smells more like a royal wardrobe than a battlefield. Scents drift past: beeswax, linseed oil, dried lavender. You pass a work tent where women are painstakingly threading tiny bells onto a horse's tail fringe. Not for sound, mind you. These bells are too small to ring. They're for shimmer, for movement, for making an entrance. And oh, the entrances. One knight arrives late on purpose just to make his horse's unveiling more dramatic. A full silk sheet is yanked off like a curtain. There's polite applause. Then gasps. The horse is pearlescent. Not white. Pearlescent. Someone has lacquered the caparison with crushed oyster shell and varnish. Inspired by the sea, the knight says. The horse, unfortunately, cannot sit still and smells strongly of low tide. You overhear a squire recounting last year's scandal, a knight who attempted to dye his horse using imported indigo mixed with goose grease. The result? A violently purple, extremely slippery stallion that launched itself into the bishop's tent. Fashion faux pas aside, it's clear that this spectacle is deliberate. Every detail, from the embroidered knee panels to the matching tassels on the reins, is a choice, a symbol, a message. Even the hoof polish comes in shades: onyx, garnet, rose gold. But what are they really saying, these choices? That's where the ego comes in. Your gaze lands on Sir Everard, standing proudly beside his destrier, whose ensemble is so aggressively lime green it borders on a crime. He's explaining to anyone who'll listen that green is the color of youth, vitality, and woodland vengeance. Someone nearby mutters, "It's the color of spoiled cabbage," and walks away sipping mead. The longer you watch, the more it becomes clear. The horse isn't just a mode of transport. It's a mirror, a projection, a very large, hay-consuming billboard for its owner's insecurities and ambitions. And it doesn't end with cloth. Some knights have trained their horses to perform. A little rear here, a dramatic snort there. Sir Gilbert's horse bows before every duel. Sir Arno's spins in place like it's auditioning for a carousel. You hear one noble scoff. It's not a warhorse if it curtsies. But his wife claps anyway. You rest on a bench, eyes blinking slow. The sunlight glints off sequined reins and pearl-studded brow bands. In this world, glory is not just won with steel. It's stitched, braided, powdered, and dyed in hues of crushed ego and ambition. You exhale, warm wind brushing your face, and somewhere nearby, a horse sneezes onto a knight's lace-up boots. You're starting to realize that in this kingdom, a knight's horse could bankrupt him faster than a siege. You pass a row of open tents where craftsmen and decorators huddle over rolls of silk, chests of semi-precious stones, and suspiciously long invoices. One merchant holds up a saddle with tooled leather so detailed you mistake it for a painting. He whispers its price to a passing noble. The noble faints. Even standing still, the horses radiate opulence. You examine one up close. Its reins are lined with silver thread, and its bit is shaped like a fleur-de-lis. A squint at the saddle reveals inlaid turquoise stones and carved panels of mythical beasts. A squire brushes it with a boar hair glove, murmuring something soothing in Old French. Nearby, two knights barter over a decorative saddle pommel shaped like a lion's head. It's solid brass and weighs more than your head. They eventually agree to a trade. The pommel for an entire goat herd. The goats are bleeding in the background. None of them aware they've just been exchanged for a butt ornament. Historians still argue whether knights actually fought in the gear they wore during tournaments, or if the over-the-top flourishes were stripped down once the trumpets died and the real work began. But here, it all blurs. You're looking at saddles padded with brocade, with embroidery thick enough to catch arrows. Some are decorated with gemstones the size of walnuts. One knight swears his saddlecloth is stitched with real unicorn hair, but you're pretty sure it's dyed goat fuzz and optimism. Then there are the stirrups. Oh, the stirrups. One pair is chased with gold, another carved from ivory, yet another encrusted with jetstones arranged in spirals. Functionality is questionable. You watch one knight get tangled trying to mount. He yelps, a bystander catches him, and both pretend nothing happened. For intimidation, the knight coughs. A steward leans toward you, grinning. Some of them spend more on their stirrups than on their wives, he says, then quickly checks if his own wife is in earshot. You notice a trend. The wealthier the knight, the more absurd the tack. Sir Elfric the Opulent, yes, really, rides a coal-black mare whose saddle is lined with ermine. Her breastplate bears a mosaic of mother-of-pearl tiles, and her tail ribbon looks suspiciously like spun silver. It jingles when she flicks it. Delicately, of course. You pass another warhorse wrapped in ruby-red silk, bearing the crest of House Duren, a weasel eating a crescent moon. The detail is so fine you can see the weasel's teeth. Historians have no idea what it means, and the family refuses to explain. There's even a scholarly paper titled, "Of Weasels and Men, Allegorical Heraldry of the Duren Lineage," which concludes absolutely nothing. Bells jingle behind you. You turn to find a teenage page carrying a box marked hoof caps. Inside, gleaming gold sheaths made to slip over hooves like shoes. Some are plain, others etched with vines or stars. This one, he says, pulling out a set with sapphire studs, makes the horse sound like a chandelier falling downstairs. You ask if that's desirable. He just nods. Functionally, a lot of this gear is questionable at best, actively dangerous at worst. One knight nearly topples over thanks to a saddle so tall it looks like a pulpit. Another insists his fringed girth strap keeps the evil eye away, though you suspect it mostly keeps the flies guessing. Still, the aesthetics win out. One foreign dignitary gazes admiringly at a destrier decked out in lapis blue and pearl beading, whispering, "That's not a horse, that's a cathedral on legs." You catch sight of an elderly knight, clearly retired, but still invited to judge the parade. He peers over a jeweled monocle and mutters, "When I rode, all we needed was leather and guts. Now it's lace and drama." His mustache twitches disapprovingly. A nearby child points to a horse with sequined armor and squeals, "Papa, that one sparkles like Mama's wedding crown." The knight sighs. Exactly. And yet, beneath all the absurdity, there's something poignant. These knights are peacocks on parade, yes, but they're also men who know their days of glory are numbered. A chipped hoof, a snapped rein, a younger challenger, and their moment is over. So they make a show while they can, and they make sure their horses shine with them. One night you pass, Sir Ronan the Careful whispers to his mare as he adjusts the silver harness looped around her brow. "Let's show them," he says. "Just once more." She blinks at him slowly, as if she understands. A steward nearby shakes his head as you wander past. "Half these fools will be broke by morning. Their horses wear better jewelry than they do." You pause at the edge of the tilt yard. A page rushes by, clutching a belt made of silk flowers and tiny bells. "Last-minute edition," he gasps. "The knight says it brings joy." The horse? Stone-faced. It's hard to know where the man ends and the horse begins. Their identities are sewn, stitched, buckled, and bolted together. A team, a performance, a declaration of wealth, strength, and dangerously bad taste. And for all the spectacle, the risk is real. You catch sight of one knight practicing his mount, a dappled mare weighed down with silver scale mail and crimson damask. She's stunning, but on her second lap, she stumbles. A girth strap's too tight, or the weight's uneven. A gasp ripples through the crowd. Her rider dismounts fast, checks her legs, then shouts at a nearby squire. The mood turns tense. A reminder, beneath the sequins and gold leaf, these are still beasts. And battle, no matter how sparkly, is still battle. As the shadows grow longer and the crowd thickens, you lean on a fence post and watch the final preparations. A bell rings 3 times. The horses begin to line up. The scent of tension rises, spiced with cloves, citrus wax, and a faint whiff of fear. Your eyes drift to a smaller, quiet horse standing at the edge. Its caparison is plain, stitched with stars and faded blue thread. Its rider stands alone, checking the girth, adjusting the bit. No silver, no jewels, just careful hands and calm breathing. Sometimes you think the flashiest things hide the most fear, and sometimes the plainest hold the most power. The tournament is still hours from its climax, but already the grounds shimmer with movement. And not the kind that's natural, wind in the grass, hooves in the dust, but the unnatural, calculated shimmer of fabric behaving badly in firelight. You hear it before you see it. A rustle, a hiss, a little scream, then a gasp, then silence. One of the horses, Sir Clement's mare, Butterwhinnie, is gently smoldering. She's fine, mostly. It's the caparison that's in danger. The crowd parts like a well-trained ocean, and a squire flings a bucket of water across her left flank. Steam explodes. A flock of pigeons takes off from the rafters. Someone mutters, "That's the 3rd one this week." You lean in to get a better look. Butterwhinnie is wearing an impossibly ornate cloth of gold, stitched with burgundy lions and what looks like a small nativity scene rendered in garnet beads. It's magnificent. It's also about as flame retardant as a haystack soaked in perfume. The culprit, as usual, is torchlight. The entire perimeter of the tilt yard is lined with dramatic, flickering torches, because, according to the herald, a noble heart is best lit by sacred fire. Unfortunately, that sacred fire is now claiming decorative horseware as its victim, one brocade panel at a time. You watch as a steward and 2 weavers rush in with sewing kits, a water skin, and what might be a prayer candle. Butterwhinnie stands patiently, her ears twitching as her embroidery is inspected for singed threads. She's used to this, apparently. Historians still argue whether cloth of gold was ever meant to be worn by horses, or if that was just a particularly opulent fever dream someone committed to out of spite. The fabric itself, a blend of silk and gold wire, is delicate, weighty, and costs roughly the price of a fortified tower. Knights draped their destriers in it anyway, sometimes because they could, sometimes because they had to. You pass another horse whose chest panel depicts the entire conquest of Sicily, rendered in satin applique and freshwater pearls. His knight claims it was an homage to heritage. More likely, it was an effort to distract the judges from his unimpressive joust record. At the edge of the stables, you spot a tailor swatting away flies while frantically trimming the hem of a horse skirt. "It keeps dragging," she mutters. "The Duchess wanted extra flourish." You helpfully step on the edge of the train to hold it in place while she snips. Up close, you realize the garment includes no fewer than 94 embroidered roses, each with tiny gold stamens. One has a single emerald sewn into the center. You don't ask why. Further down the path, a knight in flaming orange velvet is complaining loudly about his saddle cover not being fiery enough. He wanted the fabric to evoke sunrise. What he got, tragically, evokes marmalade. "I paid for celestial amber," he shrieks. The tent seamstress responds by slowly removing her apron and walking into the woods. The amount of heat involved in these ensembles is almost criminal. Beneath layers of fabric, padding, leather, and fringe, the horses sweat. You spot stable hands armed with sponges, blotting under bridles and inside elbow joints. Some knights use powdered lavender to disguise the musk. Others, more dramatically, hire apothecaries to craft bespoke perfumes for their steeds: jasmine and pine, rose and frankincense, and in one case, clove and whale ambergris. You wander past a preparation tent and get hit with a cloud of scent so intense it makes your eyes water. Inside, a horse is being rubbed down with oil infused with crushed violets and citrus peel. His knight insists it's invigorating. The horse looks more like it's trying not to sneeze. And yet, despite the hazards, the knights persist. Not just because they want their horses to look good, but because each detail serves a purpose. That cloth of gold? It gleams under sunlight, catching the eye before the opponent sees your lance. Those sparkling reins? They distract. That swirling fringe? It blurs motion. Or so the logic goes. You hear a knight boasting that he once won a joust because the sun reflected off his steed's gilded crupper and momentarily blinded his opponent. No one believes him, but everyone wants to. Some designs even incorporate subtle armor, hidden beneath silk. One mare wears a reinforced brocade breastpiece with steel plates sewn between 2 layers of velvet. It looks harmless. It weighs 70 pounds. Her knight says it's a compromise between flourish and fortification. You watch as he has to be physically lifted into the saddle by 2 servants. As the sun tilts westward, you pass another knight pacing beside a horse in pale green muslin, embroidered with tiny fish in silver thread. "For serenity," he explains, "and to honor Neptune." The horse is attempting to chew off one of the sleeves. You nod solemnly and keep walking. There's no standard to any of it, just excess, personal style, sometimes political messaging. You spot a trio of horses all wearing variations of the same color scheme, scarlet and gold, with lion motifs. Their riders are cousins, all vying for a single marriage contract, and they're trying to outdress one another into the bride's favor. Not far off, 2 bishops argue about whether a horse's jeweled saddle violates church modesty codes. "It's not the horse who wears the treasure," one insists. "It's for the glory of God." The other raises an eyebrow and mutters something about misplaced theology and horse idolatry. In a quiet patch behind the stables, a young groom adjusts the padded underside of a shimmering cloth. He smiles at you. If they knew how many of these golden threads are just onion skin dyed silk, he says, they'd have me hanged. He winks and disappears back into the tent. You sit by a fence, the soft hum of bees in the grass mixing with the faint clang of a bell. A knight passes by with a horse whose bridle is made of alternating steel and ivory links. He nods to you like it's perfectly reasonable. And maybe, here, it is. As the final hour before the joust ticks down, the arena glows, not with tension, but with color, light, and a sense of impending dramatic catastrophe. You're not sure who will win, but you're fairly certain someone's going to catch fire again. You're lounging now in the high grass near the edge of the tournament green, half dreaming, half watching a small army of grooms descend on a freckled gelding with brushes, scissors, and something that looks suspiciously like glitter paste. This is not your standard grooming session. This is a full-blown spa day for a horse. A middle-aged man with 7 rings and a braid down to his waist barks orders at the grooms. No, not straight down the mane. Give it volume. The grooms adjust. A boy dabs perfume behind the horse's ears. Another trims the fetlocks into perfectly even puffs. You've seen less fuss at royal coronations. Stylist to the high hooves of Aragon. Someone whispers behind you. He worked on Duchess Letitia's unicorn float. You nod as though you understand. Here's what you're learning. Behind every bedazzled warhorse stands a legion of equally glamorous, slightly overworked humans. Not just blacksmiths and saddle makers, but horse stylists, fabric dyers, fringe artists, and braid technicians. In this world, equine aesthetic support staff are serious business. You approach a tent labeled the Velvet Bridal. Inside, 3 men are arguing about shade palettes while threading colored beads into mane extensions. One gestures at a color wheel pinned to the canvas wall and says, "If his caparison is burgundy, we cannot go full chestnut on the braids. It'll wash him out." You quietly back away. Nearby, a group of women dressed in long linen shifts sit in a circle surrounded by bundles of ribbon and embroidery thread. One of them hums as she stitches tiny suns into the hem of a horse's hindcover. Another trims tassels while reading from a book of celestial omens. Each horse must carry beauty, balance, and intention, one tells you softly. Otherwise, the harmony is off. You ask if she means harmony between horse and rider. She blinks at you. Number harmony with the stars. Historians still argue how seriously these horse dressers took the esoteric arts. Some say the embroidery was symbolic protection. Others believe it was just couture with extra steps. But the belief systems behind the stitching ran deep. Horses were powerful, unpredictable creatures, and decorating them wasn't just about spectacle. It was in part an attempt to contain their wildness, to smooth muscle into meaning. One stylist invites you to hold a sheet of dyed silk, deep blue with silver flecks, and explains that it's been bathed in moonlight and washed with glacier water. "It's for clarity," he murmurs. You don't have the heart to tell him it smells like fish. Over by the tack station, a knight is in conference with a saddle decorator and a color interpreter. They're discussing whether his horse's ensemble, which includes gold piping and tiny embroidered geese, reflects his recent victory in an archery contest. The geese, the knight insists, represent strategy. The color interpreter nods solemnly. And fertility, she adds. Elsewhere, 2 apprentices are applying temporary tattoos to a bay mare's flank using charcoal and oil. The symbols include stars, vines, and a rune that means either divine protection or excellent cheese, depending on dialect. The apprentices argue quietly over which it is. You decide not to intervene. In a corner tent, you meet an elderly woman who calls herself a hoof reader. She sits beside a bucket of warm oil and claims that she can tell your future based on the way your horse's hooves wear down over time. Look at this one, she says, lifting a hoof. This angle, ambition. Slight outward bend, hidden sorrow. The horse sneezes. She smiles. Very ambitious indeed. You wander on, dazed. Another squire is polishing silver studs with vinegar and salt. A young girl braids fresh lavender into tail wraps while singing to herself in Occitan. Over it all, the sounds of bickering nobility and busy stylists swirl like wind through silk banners. Not far off, a horse walks by in what can only be described as a full medieval pantsuit. Matching rear leg covers, a belted tunic-shaped caparison, epaulettes. The rider, beaming with pride, shouts, "Inspired by Roman cavalry." No one questions it, except for one passing merchant who mutters, "Romans didn't bedazzle their war horses." Still, the night beams. In another tent, you glimpse a secret weapon, fabric stiffeners, boxes of them, mixtures of wax, gelatin, honey, and what smells like vinegar-soaked parchment. Keeps the pleats upright, says a tailor, spraying a mist over a golden shoulder wrap, and it gives the drapery a sort of halo in the wind. Not all the enhancements are visible. Some stylists specialize in movement illusion, tying silk ribbons in strategic places so they flutter even at a trot, creating the appearance of speed or elegance. Others focus on sound, bells of just the right pitch, clackers in the breast strap, rattling beads on the bridle, a minor symphony of intimidation. You pass one knight giving his horse a pep talk. "You're not just a mount, you're my triumph, my thunder." The horse swishes her tail. A squire approaches with a tin of glitter paste. "She said no sparkles," the knight mutters, shielding her eyes. "Not today." Even here, not all horses tolerate the glamour. Some wear it like armor, others like a wet sweater. There's a growing fashion among younger knights to let the horses decide their style. They place swatches of cloth in front of them and pick whichever one the horse nibbles first. You observe one such ritual, a destrier sniffing 3 velvets, amber, ivy green, and deep plum. He picks the green. The knight beams. "Bold and earthy," he says, just like him. The truth is, these stylists, human and horse alike, aren't just putting on a show. They're curating identity, personality, a statement, a visual poem made from cloth, hide, metal, and hope. Some might roll their eyes, others might swoon. But here, at least for today, a well-dressed horse is both muse and masterpiece. The bell rings again in the distance. Knights begin forming lines, caparisons rustle like theater curtains, hooves stamp, and the stylists, smudged, exhausted, proud, step back into the shadows. Their work is done. For now, you breathe in, scent of lavender and sweat lingering in the air. You lean back in the grass, watching as the procession begins to take shape. You wonder, what kind of fabric would you choose? What colors would your horse pick for you? The crowd thickens now, pressing along the edges of the tilt yard like curious ivy. You find yourself nudged toward the rail, sandwiched between a toothless merchant smelling of boiled onions and a noble woman with 4 lapdogs in her sleeves. All around you, people jostle for a glimpse, not of steel, not of swordplay, but of plumes. Because if there's one thing more excessive than cloth of gold saddle blankets and pearl-trimmed hoof guards, it's the feathery, fabulous, and sometimes dangerously high-stakes world of horse plume fashion. A horse can't wear a crown, but give it the right plume, a swaying tower of dyed feathers balanced just between the ears, and you've got something even better: status, power, and aerodynamic peril. You spot Sir Emmerich of the West Wind trotting into the arena now, his mount's head crowned with an arrangement so vertical it wobbles with every step. The base is ostrich, the accenting layers: peacock, dyed dove, and a single red ibis plume that twitches like it has opinions. The whole construction is secured with a velvet band and what appears to be a dab of honey. You're not sure that last part is regulation. Whispers ripple through the crowd. That's the triple stack spiral, the nerve. Last time, he nearly blinded a baron. It's said he had a feather dispute with the Duke of Montmere. Duel at dawn. Historians still argue whether these plumes were meant as noble identifiers, battle confusion tactics, or simply flamboyant self-sabotage. Some believe that height was everything. The taller the plume, the more important the rider. Others suggest the shapes held coded messages, like medieval Morse code made of feathers. Spiral meant ambition. Fan meant peace. Triple curved meant single and ready to inherit land. You lean back to watch more knights enter, each horse bearing a unique crest of feathers. There's Sir Galen the Vague with shimmering heron plumage that changes color in the light. Dame Maud of Harrowridge, whose mare wears a modest trio of pheasant feathers, dignified but unassuming. And then there's Sir Osric. His destrier's plume is so massive it drapes over her neck like a feathered shawl. She keeps sneezing. No one says anything. Plumes are as political as they are decorative. One knight rides out with a plume entirely made of crow feathers, a clear jab at his rival's hawk-themed family crest. Another arrives late, dramatically, his horse's head bare. The silence is thick. Then, at the last second, his squire sprints in with a single white egret feather and stabs it dramatically into the bridle. The crowd loses its collective mind. There's prestige in rare feathers. You overhear a merchant whispering about a knight who allegedly imported his plume collection from Egypt. Another claims his were plucked from a phoenix, though closer inspection reveals dyed goose. Still, in the plume world, vibe often outranks veracity. The stakes, you learn, are higher than they appear. In last year's tournament, a plume got caught in another rider's visor, triggering a minor pileup. 2 knights unhorsed. One squire ended up with a face full of goose down. The plumes were declared a menace, and then immediately doubled in size the next season. At the edge of the field, you spot a plume broker. Yes, that's a real job, laying out feathers like a jeweler with gems. Only the finest, he whispers to a red-cheeked noble. Macaw, flamingo, preened with rosewater. A child nearby reaches out to touch one. The broker slaps his hand gently away with a fan made entirely of pigeon. Not all the drama unfolds in the field. Behind the scenes, the peacock wars rage. You overhear snippets. She copied my fanning pattern. Well, your spirals drooped by noon last year. Tell that to the Viscount of Trell. He died mid-fan. You have no idea what any of this means, but you're utterly invested. One knight is rumored to have secretly hired a falconer to train hawks to target rival plumes. Another allegedly bribed a squire to snip an opponent's base thread just before the parade. The result? A majestic plume collapse in front of the archbishop. There were tears, and fainting, and one very confused pigeon. Not to be outdone, Dame Eleonora's horse enters the field with no visible plume, until you realize the tail is the plume. It arcs upward, braided and stiffened with beeswax and dyed violet. The whole thing shimmers like wet ribbon under the torchlight. The crowd gasps. The bishop clutches his rosary. Somewhere, a young noble faints into a hedgehog pie. And then there's the noise. You hadn't considered it before, but when 40 horses enter at once, each with plumes creaking, snapping, swaying, and sometimes whistling in the wind, it sounds like a haunted aviary. One older knight mutters, "Back in my day, all a horse needed was a bridle and backbone." You suspect he secretly owns at least 3 feather boas. You spot a young squire off to the side, carefully steaming a limp plume over a kettle. His knight paces nervously nearby. "If it flops," he murmurs, "I lose everything." The squire says nothing but adds a pinch of lavender oil to the steam, just in case. Not every plume is a hit. One knight attempts a revolutionary side plume design, 2 massive fans angled like butterfly wings. It looks breathtaking, until the wind picks up. Within seconds, the whole contraption spins like a weather vane, and the horse bolts sideways into a fruit cart. Apples fly. Peasants scream. The plume remains majestic throughout. As the pre-joust parade begins, the horses move in formation, 12 abreast, each one swaying beneath its knight's colors, their feathered headdresses bobbing like waves on a jeweled sea. The effect is hypnotic. Plumes tilt with the wind, ripple with motion, and blur against the sky until you can't quite tell where one ends and the next begins. The crowd doesn't cheer. Not yet. This is the sacred silence of horse vogue hour. You feel your shoulders drop. Your breathing slows. Even the lapdogs in the noblewoman's sleeves go still. You gaze out across the tilt yard. Flashes of blue jay and goldfinch. Whispers of heron and dove. Horses dressed like operatic forest spirits. And somewhere, deep in your bones, you know, you'll never unsee this many feathers again. Just as the last plume settles into its final defiant bob, the horns sound again, lower now, more theatrical. You sense it's not a battle call, it's a catwalk cue. The horses begin to shift, not into jousting lanes, but into a slow, deliberate promenade. The tournament, you realize, is not just a combat display. It's a fashion show, and not just for knights. It's for the horses and their wardrobes. You lean against the rail, half expecting a tiny herald to shout, "And now, presenting Sir Aldrich of Vire with his spring-summer collection of quilted reins and embroidered vengeance." The destriers advance with stately grace, each caparison unfurled like a walking tapestry. Some shimmer with gold thread, some look like spilled ink under the sunlight. One, an enormous black steed with a neck like a battering ram, wears a layered silk ensemble so voluminous it trails behind like a bride's train. A few children scamper after it, plucking loose sequins as souvenirs. There's an unspoken ranking in these parades. The frontrunners carry themselves with the authority of noble houses long steeped in fashion-related debt. You overhear a young squire explain, "Sir Blaise goes first." His horse has an inlaid tourney map stitched directly into the fabric. Real silver lines. The child he's explaining it to just nods solemnly, as if that makes perfect sense. Your eye catches Sir Ranulph's horse next, a muscular bay swaddled in cerulean damask with silver dragons curling along its sides. It blinks slowly, like it knows it looks incredible. You wonder how long it took to train a warhorse not to panic under 60 pounds of brocade. Historians still argue whether caparisons, these elaborate horse garments, were more about intimidating enemies, advertising wealth, or shielding the horses from sunburn. Others suspect they were part of an unspoken arms race among nobles to see who could bankrupt their lineage with the most pointless dazzle. You can't help but notice the extremes. Some caparisons are so stiff with metal thread embroidery, they don't even bend when the horse turns. Others are whisper-thin layers of gauze and lace, dyed the color of champagne, fluttering like sea foam in the breeze. One particularly bold knight has gone full monochrome, black velvet with black trim, black roses, and a black fringe so dense it looks like his horse is melting. There's even a rumored scandal on the field. Apparently, Sir Geoffroy is wearing last year's saddlecloth cut into panels. Recycled, one onlooker hisses, as though he'd ridden in naked. From the banquet circuit. Still, nothing compares to the synchronized duo approaching now. Twin knights, brothers perhaps, in matching coral and gold. Their horses step in perfect unison, veils trailing behind them like comets. It's absurd. It's gorgeous. You find yourself clapping softly without realizing it. And then comes the crowd favorite, Lady Sabine of Dorness. Not a knight by official title, those rules being inconveniently patriarchal, but she rides anyway, straight-backed and luminous. Her mare is wrapped in a translucent lavender silk, studded with small glass beads that catch the sun like dewdrops. The effect is so dreamlike it's almost embarrassing. Several peasants audibly sigh. One swoons. You might have too. But the best part? Her saddle is carved wood painted with tiny, sleepy sheep. No symbolism, no family crest, just sheep, and a wink to the audience. You love her instantly. Beside you, a merchant mutters, "She's the reason the Embroidery Guild doubled their prices last winter." The caparisons aren't just for looks, of course, or so they claim. Some are sewn with small bells to unnerve enemies. Others are soaked in rosewater to mask the sweaty scent of horse, a curious choice for battle. One legend insists a knight once wore a caparison covered in garlic flowers to keep away plague and suitors. It worked. Too well. You note how some horses strut while others sulk, clearly unamused by the attention. One gives its own fringe a good shake and snorts, as if saying, "Get this curtain off me." A young squire rushes to rebrush its decorative forelock. Priorities. A few mishaps unfold. One knight's heavily embellished corner tassel snags on a fence post. His horse jerks sideways, unseating him into a basket of cured hams. Another destrier, draped in metallic green, gets too close to a torch and begins to steam gently. A monk runs over with a bucket. Still, the show must go on. And the real competition, unspoken but intense, is among the spectators. Nobles lean over each other, whispering critiques. Too much fringe. That trims a scandal. Is that cotton? I thought this was a royal tourney. One duchess adjusts her own hat to better match a passing horse. A bishop squints jealously at a caparison stitched with psalms. You take in the color, the clinking metal trim, the layered silks that seem to ripple with the horse's every breath. One mare wears a constellation pattern so intricate it includes the North Star and at least one comet. Another stallion is decorated entirely in red, with white handprints across its flank. A symbolic blessing? A warning? Or just avant-garde nonsense? Historians still debate whether certain symbols were meant as coded messages. Some designs seem to reference old romances. Others hint at territorial disputes. A few are just strangely specific. like the knight whose horse bears a stitched image of a fish playing a harp. No one's brave enough to ask. The parade begins to circle. The horses turn, then trot again down the length of the arena, caparisons fluttering in a choreographed breeze. The effect is like watching waves of color roll across a field of living statues. Your eyes begin to relax, lulled by the rhythm of hooves, the sway of silk, the flash of feathers. Somewhere behind you, a child whispers, "I want to be a horse when I grow up." You nod, because honestly, same. And just when you think the procession might end, a final rider enters. No pageantry, no color, just crisp white linen and a single stitched rose on the saddle. Understated, powerful. The crowd falls respectfully quiet. The horse trots with dignity, like it knows it doesn't need glitter. It has vibes. Then the horns sound again. The fashion parade ends. The joust will begin soon, you're told. But frankly, it feels unnecessary, because the horses have already won. The joust is delayed. Apparently, a duke fainted, not from injury, but from the overwhelming scent of horse perfume. And not just any perfume, mind you. This was a bespoke blend of jasmine, lavender, rosewater, cinnamon bark, crushed saffron, and oddly enough, fig syrup. 1 drop would make your grandmother swoon. 15 drops? A full-scale olfactory assault. You step back from the stalls where the pre-joust grooming continues with obsessive fervor. Squires dart in and out of curtained grooming pavilions, arms laden with jars, brushes, bundles of herbs, and what looks suspiciously like a mini incense censer shaped like a lion. The air smells like a cathedral collided with a bakery. The horse closest to you, an Appaloosa with a silver mane, is being gently fanned while 2 attendants rub its neck with lemon balm and something that might be crushed violets. Another squire's mists its hooves. Yes, hooves, with rose oil. You overhear one knight growl, "If this horse doesn't smell like the queen's bathwater, I'll hang you by your garters." Apparently, this isn't just preening. It's a scented arms race. Your destrier must smell as powerful as it looks. Some knights favor spicy blends meant to evoke heat and fury. Clove, pepper, musk. Others go for the floating down a lily-covered river with a harp vibe. Mint, basil, elderflower, and powdered pearl. One knight has clearly gone rogue. His horse smells like roast almonds and pear tarts. Either a mistake or a bold statement. You try not to sneeze. Historians still argue whether horse perfume was strictly ceremonial or actually functional. Some believe it helped mask the smell of stress and sweat, both horse and human. Others say it acted as a talisman against disease or bad luck. A few think it was just a way for the ultra-rich to signal wealth so aggressively that even their horses had personal fragrances. In any case, it's working. You watch a new arrival, a tall bay stallion with glossy flanks, walk by, its mane braided with lavender sprigs and tiny bells. The scent it carries is cool and citrusy, like fresh-cut lemongrass. You sigh without meaning to. Beside you, a merchant fanatically scribbles down ingredients, possibly planning to launch the first medieval horse fragrance line. One young squire appears carrying a heavy silver container engraved with vines. He opens it reverently, and an aromatic plume wafts out. It smells like honey, lilac, and possibly opulence. The horse snorts with approval as the boy carefully sprinkles it along the spine, like seasoning a roast. Meanwhile, another team appears to be dyeing a horse's tail in real time. It starts white, then turns a soft blush pink. You're not even surprised anymore. A stable hand cheerfully explains it's a mixture of beetroot juice and powdered coral for radiance and depth. You make a note to never let your own hair feel this underdressed again. Some of the perfume preparations become theatrical. One knight prays loudly while waving a sprig of rosemary over his steed. Another holds out a golden thurible swinging with smoke and murmurs. For courage, clarity, and absolutely no fleas. There are even regional preferences. Italian knights seem to prefer sharper, lemon-based blends, while the French favor layered florals. A German knight demands that his destriers smell like pine, steel, and blood oranges. The horse, one assumes, has no opinion. You pass one stall where a truly devoted handler is applying powdered silver to the horse's nose bridge. To catch the light, he insists. The result is somewhere between celestial and circus. You politely decline the offered sample. One horse nearby smells so strongly of vanilla and patchouli that a bee follows it for several laps around the paddock. When a second bee joins in, the knight starts panicking, slapping at the air while trying not to wrinkle his lavender tabard. Do they always do this? You ask a stable girl, gesturing at the chaos. She shrugs. Only the rich ones. Commoners use vinegar and hope. And just when you think the olfactory madness has reached its peak, a procession of musicians enters, carrying wind chimes. They begin to gently shake the chimes around one particular steed, which is then spritzed with rosewater and chamomile before being handed an actual apple dipped in cinnamon. You stare. The horse eats it like royalty, then immediately sneezes. Across the field, one knight is having a breakdown. His peppermint oil has gone missing, and he insists the enemy knight sabotaged it. My horse needs its cooling balm, or I cannot ride. You're starting to wonder if this entire event was ever meant for actual combat. It's like the horses have become both noble companions and walking fashion influencers with their own entourage, signature scents, and nervous breakdowns. There's a fringe theory among modern scholars, well, one very enthusiastic professor at Cambridge, that some knights began treating their horses like avatars of their public identity. If your armor showed power, your horse's scent showed sophistication, or sensuality, or your family's wealth in saffron imports. A medieval flex, if you will. But you're also reminded that in a world where hygiene is, let's be generous, inconsistent, a perfumed horse probably did make a difference. Imagine galloping past an enemy, and instead of sweat and wet leather, they smell roses. Psychological warfare at its softest. One final note. A few knights swear by superstitious blends, horsetail wrapped in basil to ward off curses, or juniper oil mixed with nail scrapings from a monk's horse. You don't ask. One comparison bears an embroidered bottle with the words, "Blessed by Saint Tanglehoof," which you're 90% sure isn't a real saint. You pass through one final grooming pavilion before returning to your own mount, now faintly sweet with cinnamon clove and a touch of pine resin. It's pleasant. You lean your cheek against its neck, inhale slowly, and feel something ease in your chest. Maybe it's the horse perfume, or maybe it's just the absurdity of all this. But you're starting to feel like you belong here. And your horse? It smells better than you do. Your feet crunch softly on the gravel as you walk past a line of horses so extravagantly caparisoned, it's hard to tell whether this is a tournament or a roaming circus of silk and embroidery. One destrier bears a golden sun stitched across its flank. Another, a leaping frog in mid-croak, its tongue shimmering with green thread. Yet another trots by bearing what appears to be a weeping onion. You blink. The onion's got shading. You stare too long, and the night glares at you as if to say, "Yes, that's my family's onion. Got a problem?" Welcome to the world of stitched propaganda, where every horse is a walking medieval meme, cloaked in centuries of noble insecurities and ancestral PR. Today's parade of comparisons isn't just for fashion. Each one is layered with symbols, stories, and not-so-subtle messages. They whisper boasts, issue threats, or occasionally broadcast internal family drama that really should have stayed in the tower. You watch as a knight rides past with a dragon coiled around a tower. The dragon wears a crown. The tower wears a frown. Historians still argue whether this was meant to honor a victorious siege or shade a mother-in-law. A nearby squire informs you that some of these images are ancient heraldic devices, passed down through bloodlines, reinterpreted, embellished. But others? They're creative liberty, commissioned for a single event, sometimes even made up on the spot. Take the knight to your left. His steed's flank is covered in embroidered hairs, all of them wearing boots. The caption beneath reads, in Latin, "Swift with style." You assume it's aspirational. The horse, meanwhile, looks mildly annoyed to be branded with what might be the medieval equivalent of a bumper sticker. It becomes clear to you that these stitched messages are as competitive as the joust itself. One knight has included a snake coiled around a broken scepter, possibly referencing a rival family's recent scandal. Another knight's horse wears a cape bearing the full text of a land grant, complete with legal seals and the phrase, "Ratified by the king." You wonder if this counts as notarized bragging. Even the placement of the embroidery is strategic. Eye-level motifs are designed to grab attention. Lower panels, often near the tail, might feature hidden jokes or personal touches. You spot one with two ducks sipping wine under a moon. Subtle, strange, and definitely not something from the official heraldic registry. One knight's horse wears a full scene, a battle, a marriage, and a ghostly figure looming in the background. The craftsmanship is exquisite. Tiny gold thread used for halo effects, blood rendered in garnet beads, clouds stitched in silk floss. You're impressed until the horse attempts a trot and the whole tableau bunches like a crumpled bedsheet. You learn from a talkative page that many of these designs were done by specialist artisans, some who worked for months, others who were bribed to include certain interpretations of family history. There's even a scandal brewing. Someone's lion has been stitched with 5 claws instead of 4, and it's being taken as a serious insult. The page sighs. People have dueled over less. One time, a knight embroidered a snail onto another's horse. A snail. With his nose. You raise your eyebrows. He nods solemnly. Duel by sunset. Over the nose snail. You're not surprised. Among all the extravagance, you spot a quieter horse. Its caparison a simple navy blue with a small acorn stitched near the chest. It's barely visible, but it draws your attention like a whisper in a shouting match. You ask the groom, and he says it's the symbol of a long-lost forest, burned during a land dispute. He rides for memory, not victory, the groom adds, almost proudly. Historians still argue whether most knights understood the symbols on their horses, or if they just picked what looked good in the torchlight. One theory suggests many caparisons were reused from older generations, sometimes carrying outdated feuds or irrelevant references. Another school insists each detail was deliberate, down to the color of thread and angle of embroidery. Speaking of thread, gold work is common. but so is beadwork, sequin stitching, and even tiny bells sewn into hems. One horse jingles faintly as it moves, like a mobile chapel on hooves. Another glints with mother-of-pearl buttons stitched in constellations. You spot Orion. And a goat? Possibly an ancestral zodiac. There are whispers, too, of knights who commissioned coded caparisons, symbols that only certain eyes could read. A white crow for betrayal, a pomegranate for secret fertility, a stag's head turned slightly to the left to mean, I know what you did last tournament. No one admits it outright, but you hear plenty of suggestive murmurs. And then there's the fringe stuff. Some caparisons are meant to summon luck or divine favor. Embroidered charms, apotropaic eyes, geometric labyrinths. You see a horse wearing what looks like an entire astrological birth chart. His knight claims it's timed for maximum Mars energy. The horse, again, seems unimpressed. You pass a particularly edgy knight whose steed wears a black cloth embroidered entirely in blood-red roses, each petal outlined with tiny, real rubies. It's bold, it's heavy, it's clearly designed to say, don't mess with me unless your purse jingles louder than mine. Another horse is cloaked in white, with a single red dot in the center. Minimalist. Ominous. Someone whispers it represents the first drop of blood the knight ever spilled. Someone else suggests it's just a wine stain they leaned into. As always, truth hides behind the embroidery. And yet, even amid all this spectacle, you feel something almost sweet. Because no matter how over the top, these stitched symbols are little declarations of hope, fear, pride, and legacy, worn not by the knights, but by the animals who carry them. It's strangely touching. Each horse becomes a moving canvas of fragile bravado and ancestral scrapbooking. As you run your fingers gently along a hem fringed with silver lilies, you think about what you'd embroider. A moon? A key? A plate of biscuits? Probably not the onion, though. Even that has its place here. You lean against a wooden rail as the knights begin their practice rounds. Just a warm-up, they say, but the horses are already dressed like parade floats at midnight. And as you watch them trot past, you notice something strange. Not just beautiful, but strategic. One destrier glides by wearing a fabric so shimmery it blurs the line between muscle and silk. Is it fat? Is it strong? You can't tell. The next one? Cloaked in scale-like metallic fabric that mimics armor, only lighter. The effect is dazzling and disorienting. This is tactical glamour, and it's not just for show. It's horseware engineered to fool the eye, flatter the figure, and confuse your enemies. You're not at a simple joust anymore. You're at a full-on medieval runway where optical illusions can determine the outcome of battle, or at least impress the right duchess. You remember the knight with the shimmering plum-colored cloth. Up close, it's actually multiple layers of thread, twisted with tiny metallic slivers that catch light at different angles. When the horse moves, its hindquarters ripple like water. A squire tells you this was intentional. Makes him look faster than he is. You laugh, then realize he's dead serious. Historians still argue whether such fabrics truly offered tactical advantage, or if it was just aristocratic vanity in yet another glittery disguise. Some claim enemies hesitated at the sight of a horse that gleamed like the sun. Others think it was all theater, elaborate ways to boost confidence before the real bruising began. Either way, these knights don't just dress for war, they dress to distort. A popular trick among the richer knights involves illusion armor, layers of painted cloth mimicking steel plate, stitched with shadow lines and brushwork to give the illusion of bulk and strength. One knight, not particularly brawny, has his steed outfitted with painted pectorals, muscles on muscles. You have to squint to realize it's not actual armor, it's theatrical textile wizardry. But it's not just fake muscles. Some cloths are designed to conceal flaws. Horses with scars or bruises are swaddled in patterned fabric that draws the eye elsewhere, perhaps toward an embroidered flame motif or a dangling sash meant to flap distractingly. You see a knight fussing over a silver tassel hanging just low enough to cover an awkward limp. Practical, stylish, slightly ridiculous. And then there are the psychological plays. Take the knight who's dressed his horse entirely in dull gray linen, no decoration at all, like a monk in a monastery of sequins. The effect is chilling. You look at it and think, he must be terrifying. Only someone truly deadly wears nothing at all. It's fashion as reverse psychology, and it works. Several spectators edge away from him without knowing why. Or the knight whose horse is wrapped in mirror discs, catching and scattering sunlight so aggressively you can't keep your eyes on it. A visual assault, possibly a fire hazard. One of the other horses panics and nearly bolts. It's a distraction technique, a woman whispers behind you. Also terrible for birds. You wonder if any of these design choices were actually tested in real combat, or if they only thrive in the soft, ceremonial light of courtly tournaments. Historians still puzzle over where the line was, between warhorse and theater steed, between genuine intimidation and highly flammable cosplay. Speaking of fire hazards, you notice that some fabrics have been stiffened into sculptural shapes. One horse wears wing-like flares around its shoulders. Another has ribbed cloth panels that expand slightly as it moves, making it appear larger. A kind of visual trickery known as faux bulk. The idea, look big, feel big, maybe get your opponent to flinch. Of course, not everyone gets it right. One unfortunate knight gallops by with what's clearly a wind-activated skirt that's flapping far too enthusiastically. It was probably meant to invoke speed. Instead, it looks like he's being eaten by an unruly curtain. You pretend not to notice. So does his horse. The materials vary wildly. Brocade, velvet, quilted linen. Some light enough to flutter like dragonfly wings, others thick as mattress pads. One knight uses an imported fabric rumored to be spun from fish silk, so fine it disappears under torchlight. His destrier seems wrapped in smoke. But this isn't just about visuals. Tactile effects matter too. Some knights opt for textured fabrics designed to create specific sounds when the horse moves. The rustle of heavy taffeta, the crunch of embedded parchment layers. One horse makes a strange whirring noise as it trots. Tiny wooden beads stitched inside the hem. The sound's hypnotic, a lullaby, or a warning. You overhear a pair of squires arguing about color psychology. Apparently, some believe that red horses win more. Others insist that green attracts envy and therefore misfortune. You look at your own tunic, which is a muted beetroot, and wonder where you fall in this esoteric spectrum. And just when you think you've seen it all, a knight appears whose horse is completely wrapped in embroidered script. Tiny, swirling letters, too small to read from a distance. You step closer and spot Latin phrases, Bible verses, possibly poetry. It moves like a walking manuscript. The effect is uncanny. Protection spells, someone says. He's a little superstitious. A little. There's also a knight whose horse wears a full patchwork cloak, pieced from dozens of tiny fabric squares, each bearing a symbol, a scrap of family tartan, or a bit of old armor padding. It's like riding into battle wearing your grandmother's memory quilt. And somehow, it's incredibly charming. You begin to realize that this illusion dressing isn't about deception alone. It's about narrative control. Each night is telling you something, whether it's fear me, pity me, or be dazzled by my imported flamingo silk. Some stories are honest, some are pure fantasy, but all are stitched with care, or at least considerable coin. The horses, meanwhile, soldier on, tactical, glam, and likely overheating beneath their layers of stylized cloth and warlike whimsy. They've become something more than animals. They're avatars, living billboards, ornamental beasts of burden, yes, but also co-authors in a performance that feels part Broadway, part battlefield. And maybe that's the secret. Beneath all the theatrics and shimmer and strategic stitching, these nightly horse dresses aren't really for hiding. They're for shining, for bluffing, for storytelling. Just like the onion badge, just like the weeping acorn. And maybe, just maybe, like you, trying to glide through your own life with some dignity, a few distractions, and the illusion of perfect poise. You're watching from a safe distance now, mostly because the last knight who galloped past left behind a trail of beads, sequins, and what appeared to be the remnants of a lace-trimmed saddle pad. The tournament grounds are starting to look less like a battlefield and more like the backstage chaos of a bridal fashion show during an earthquake. And you're about to discover that not every glimmering, rustling, tassel-swinging detail is intentional. Because in this glitter-drenched universe, where every feather is fluffed and every bridle is embroidered to within an inch of collapse, sabotage is just another thread in the tapestry. It begins with a whisper. A squire behind you mutters something about a loosened stitch and a missing buckle. You squint at the knight he's pointing toward. From a distance, everything seems in order. But as the destrier trots forward, you notice one of the caparison's side panels slipping lower, tugging at the horse's movement. An accidental fashion malfunction. Maybe, or maybe not. Historians still argue whether sabotage in knightly tournaments was common or simply exaggerated by bardic gossip. What's clear, though, is that anything involving precious materials, rival families, and competitive egos is probably going to get shady. The signs are subtle at first. A carefully sewn seam begins to unravel mid-joust. A delicate row of pearls seems to drop one by one, as though the fabric has caught a very slow and very expensive disease. A knight leans forward, suddenly distracted, as his horse's mane glitter, liberally applied moments ago, starts migrating into his eyes. You don't need a historian to tell you. Someone's messing with the horse drip. A fringe too long might tangle underhoof. A dangling charm, just barely repositioned, could swing at an odd angle and spook a destrier mid-turn. You see a squire scurrying after his knight's steed, clutching a shredded tassel with the panic of a man who knows he's about to be screamed at in French. Then it escalates. One knight, Sir Ludo, you think, attempts his turn at the joust. The crowd cheers. His steed barrels forward, majestic in sapphire damask and sequined haunch curtains. Everything seems perfect, until halfway down the field, a small puff of feathers explodes from the saddle like a startled parakeet. You'd laugh, but the knight nearly falls. Later, someone claims that a rival squire stitched loose feathers into the underside of the saddlecloth, right along the friction line. All it took was pressure and motion to trigger the feathery mini-eruption. You begin to understand that in the tournament world, the cloth isn't just decorative, it's a battleground. And the tools of sabotage are subtle, domestic, and oddly adorable. Crooked needles, rogue embroidery threads, swapped brooches, perfume bottles filled with vinegar instead of rosewater. Yes, that happened. A knight named Sir Odo, who rides a famously high-strung palfrey, always perfumes his horse before entry. Calms the nerves, he claims. Today, however, his steed bolts violently at the scent. Turns out, someone had swapped the lavender oil for a splash of fish brine. You know this, because your nose nearly leaves your face when the horse gallops by. It's not just riders being targeted. Horses can be sabotaged directly, but delicately. An off-color ribbon tied too tightly around a tail. A polished hoof, slightly sandpapered to mess with grip. Or the worst offense of all, a snipped tassel right before entrance. The knights take this very seriously. These tassels are more than flair. They're part of the horse's decorative identity. Sometimes stitched by family members, carrying sigils, prayers, or passive-aggressive messages for the audience. Removing one is like yanking someone's nameplate off their office door, or tearing off a patch from a battle jacket. It's emotional. You see a knight nearly weep when he realizes his gold braid is missing. His squire, pale and trembling, confesses that he turned away for just a moment. That moment, apparently, was enough for another team to sneak over and liberate the braid as a trophy. Because yes, that's a thing too. Some knights treat collected adornments as battlefield spoils. There's a whole unspoken economy around stolen sequins, plucked feathers, and misplaced embroidery hoops. Some are returned as peace offerings. Others reappear stitched mockingly into rival garb. Historians still debate how widespread this soft sabotage really was, or whether it's a product of tournament romanticism. But the physical evidence is there. Manuscripts show horses with uneven hem lengths, missing panels, and sudden costume changes, mid-event. One illuminated page even shows a knight triumphantly holding a broken stirrup strap aloft, like a relic. The caption reads, "Victory by threads." And then there are the sabotage innovations, the medieval equivalent of glitter bombs and booby-trapped corsages. You hear of a knight who tucked a tiny pouch of bells into the rival's saddle wrap. The noise, imperceptible at rest, drove the other horse mad once the galloping began. No one could prove who did it, but a suspiciously smug squire was seen later jingling something in his pocket. Another knight had his horse's decorative veil subtly shortened, just enough to whip him in the face during a particularly sharp turn. Wind-calculated tailoring, someone calls it. And still another? Let's just say that someone replaced his saddle pommel cover with a highly inappropriate puppet. You do not ask further questions. You begin to admire the low-key pettiness of it all. This isn't brute force treachery. It's fabric-level espionage, haute couture sabotage, not war, but wardrobe warfare. And in the realm of horse glam, the stakes are oddly high. Reputation rides on the sparkle after all. A knight with a ragged hem may as well ride naked. One with a mismatched plume is socially doomed. And if your horse's bridle jingles off tempo, well, you'll be talked about over mead for a week. Even if no one's caught, the tension lingers. You watch the next set of knights ride out, eyes flicking nervously to the fringe, ears twitching at any sound of fraying silk. A beautiful destrier stops mid-step, clearly uncertain about the glitter-specked path ahead. Its rider leans down, whispers something soothing. The horse proceeds, but slower, paranoid, as if it too suspects sabotage might be sewn into the seams. And you? You quietly check your own tunic hem, just in case. You wander through the shade of a linen tent, still mildly glitter-dusted from the last catastrophe, and nearly walk straight into a sermon. A friar stands atop an upturned crate, waving a scroll with the enthusiasm of a man who's never been trampled by a bejeweled horse. His voice booms, "Vanity is the devil's mirror, and horses were not meant to shimmer." Behind him, a knight's horse is being rubbed down with crushed pearls and rose oil. You sidestep quickly, unsure which party will explode first, the preacher or the groom, holding the cinnamon-scented mane pomade. Welcome to the eternal tension between the church and the horse drip. This isn't new. Even centuries ago, religious figures occasionally raised their eyebrows, then their voices, about the lengths knights went to turn their steeds into gliding confections. You hear phrases like ungodly luxury, sinful ribbons, and the great caparison of pride. A child nearby snickers. You pretend not to. The friar locks eyes with you, jabs a finger skyward, and declares, "For what doth it profit a man to adorn his beast in gold, and yet trample humility under hoof?" You nod solemnly, while quietly admiring the scalloped edge of Sir Aldrich's embroidered saddlecloth as he trots past. Historians still argue whether the church's condemnation of equine fashion was moral concern or just good old-fashioned jealousy. After all, not everyone gets to canter past adoring fans in silk armor. And some ecclesiastics did mysteriously show up later with unusually shiny mules. One even commissioned a manuscript where biblical prophets rode horses wearing fringe that looked suspiciously tournament-inspired. Still, the sermons continued. Many clergy saw these tournaments, and especially their visual extravagance, as distractions from godliness. Feathers were too frivolous, sequins were too showy, and gold-threaded bridles were considered just a bit too Babylonian. To be fair, some of the knights didn't help their case. One nobleman insisted on draping his charger in 12 different shades of purple, claiming it represented the 12 labors of Saint Gerbert. A friar pointed out that Saint Gerbert was mostly known for bread distribution and mild miracles, not for inspiring horses that looked like walking pomegranates. Another knight reportedly shaped his horse's tail into a fleur-de-lis and sprinkled it with powdered silver, which he insisted was in honor of the Virgin. Even the local bishop choked on that one. And yet, even amid scoldings and scripture, the decoration never stopped. Because for every disapproving friar, there was a court lady swooning at the sight of a horse whose hooves were painted, yes, painted, to match the knight's coat of arms. And for every monk shaking his head over crushed velvet, there was a child trying to catch one of the loose sequins flying off mid-trot. You spot a particularly garish example now. A palfrey striding past in cloth of silver so reflective, it briefly blinds the man holding the holy water basin. The friar is undeterred. He continues to thunder about excess and distraction, quoting scripture with increasing volume, possibly hoping the horses themselves might repent. One destrier pauses to scratch its ear with a jeweled hoof. The irony is almost too much. And yet, you notice something odd. The very same friar who condemns these knightly fashions also seems to be lingering just a bit too long at the edge of the field, watching, squinting, judging, but also, perhaps admiring? You wander closer and overhear him muttering, "That hem stitch is crooked. 'Tis lazy embroidery." A heresy? Or a hidden talent? Because the truth is, some members of the clergy secretly loved the spectacle. Monasteries were no strangers to fabric work. Many monks and nuns were expert weavers, dyers, and illustrators. Their hands knew gold thread. Their eyes could spot poorly dyed madder red from 50 paces. So while the sermons continued on the surface, beneath the cowl, some clergy members probably kept little mental notes. Which knight had the best feather symmetry, whose banner lacked flair, who had committed the sin, not of pride, but of bad taste. Still, for others, the offense was real and deep. You hear a different priest, quieter than the first, explain to a group of children that horses should be respected, not humiliated by being dressed like cakes. He gestures to one beast trotting by with sequined hooves, braided forelocks, and a tail that looks like a pastry shell. The kids giggle, but you see his point. A warhorse was once a sacred beast, bred for strength and loyalty. To some, its transformation into a rhinestoned parade float felt like a betrayal. You imagine a knight clanking into battle, his mount glinting like a disco ball, while enemy archers pause, not from fear, but from confusion. This, the priest warns, is the danger, that spectacle can replace substance, and glitter can blind a man to virtue. At that moment, a trumpet blares. A knight rides forth in head-to-hoof brocade, tassels swinging, fabric rippling like waves on a sunset sea. The crowd cheers. The friars sigh. And you? You can't help it. You clap too, because deep down, you understand both sides. Yes, the horse looks ridiculous. No, it probably doesn't care. And yes, the church may have a point, but so does Sir Aldrich, who just wants to match his horse's caparison to his lucky tournament socks. This is the medieval contradiction in motion. Sermons and sequins, incense and embroidery, God and glitter. Later, you pass a chapel tent where a few friars sip watered wine and quietly debate whether saddle jewels might be used to fund a new roof. One suggests that if knights simply tithed their feather budgets, they could rebuild Rome. Another mutters, or at least get new candles. The idea of divine horse fashion doesn't seem so far-fetched after all. As the sun begins to lower, casting gold onto the tournament field, the debate cools. The loud friar disappears, likely off to find a new box to stand on. The quieter priests remain, their eyes occasionally drifting toward the shimmer of silks, the gleam of brass. You suspect they'll preach again tomorrow. But tonight, even they seem content to sit and watch a world where pride rides a horse draped in ribbon, and humility sells embroidery tips from the sidelines. You're wiping a spot of glitter off your sleeve again when a ripple of anticipation passes through the crowd. The trumpets haven't sounded, no flag has dropped, but something different is happening. You feel it before you see it. There's a hush. Then, the unmistakable clop of hooves. Out of the makeshift stables come two horses, walking side by side. One gleams like a myth, the other plods like a legend. The first is draped in silk as thin as breath, its mane woven with satin ribbons and tiny glass beads that catch the sunlight like dew. Its hooves have been dusted with crushed violet, and it smells faintly of rosewater and mint. The second? All muscle, scars, and stubbornness. Its caparison is practical, wool trimmed with leather, frayed from real rides and real battles. A jagged ear tells you it's seen more than one battlefield. No perfume, no glitter. Just the smell of sweat, hay, and maybe a little resentment. And you realize you're looking at a warhorse and a pageant pony. At least, that's what they're calling them now. The whispers grow louder. He brought his wife's palfrey. Is that a mare? He can't ride that into a joust. It's barely taller than a laundry mule. Historians still argue whether some knights actually borrowed their wives' better-dressed, gentler, but objectively stunning horses for tournaments. Not for war. No, never that. But for the parade ring, the fashion canter, or the gentle pre-joust lap around the field, where appearances mattered more than armor. And the thing is, those smaller, prettier horses often turned heads. The warhorse might win a tilt, but the palfrey? It might win hearts. The line between functional destrier and decorative show steed was beginning to blur. As tournaments evolved from military practice into aristocratic theater, the horses changed too. Bulk and aggression were replaced, at least temporarily, with elegance, rhythm, and just the right swish of tail fringe. You pass two grooms whispering in hushed tones about a gelding with lashes longer than the Duchess, and a charger that throws less of a fit when you brush its ankles. Because let's face it, some of these so-called battle steeds hadn't faced a battle since their grandfathers did. They were bred for drama, trained for pageantry. One even had its teeth polished to match its knight's polished cuirass. And yet, it's complicated. The war horses still had their place. You hear the creak of old leather as one of them shifts in its stall, muscles twitching under a faded caparison. Its eyes scan the crowd, not for applause, but for threats. This one doesn't care about ribbons. It cares about control. Its rider, too, wears minimal frills. There's an edge to him, like he's been somewhere the others haven't. Perhaps he has. Not every knight decorates for show. Some carry real scars, and their horses, less adorned, less perfumed, do too. But the spectators? They love a visual. Which is why, over time, even those grizzled warriors occasionally cave and add a tassel. Maybe two. You once saw a veteran knight grumble his way into a golden bridle, simply because a 10-year-old girl asked if his horse was broken, because it didn't sparkle. He lost the match, but gained 3 fan letters and a miniature portrait of his horse painted in absurdly shiny armor. There are stories, half-truths, whispered legends, of knights who dressed up workhorses to resemble their showy rivals, hoping to cash in on the visual dazzle and throw off their opponents. One tale describes a draft horse in dyed velvet and glued-on rhinestones who caused such confusion the crowd cheered for the wrong knight. True? Maybe. Absurd? Absolutely. Possible? Entirely. You peer around and spot one of these in-betweeners now, a mare with both muscle and flair. Her tack is tasteful but unmistakably ornamental. A thin silver chain drapes across her shoulders. Her mane has been dyed the color of new hay. Subtle, regal, confusing. Is she meant for show or for battle? No one seems to know. And maybe that's the point. Some knights, you learn, actually cultivated this ambiguity. They wanted their rivals uncertain. Was that a real warhorse under all that damask? Or just a buttercup-fed beauty made for moonlit walks and portraits? Even the judges weren't sure sometimes. And in a world where status often trumped skill, confusion could be a weapon. Then there were those who went fully the other direction. They leaned into the softness, the elegance, the drama. Horses with names like Velvet Echo or Sir Whisker Nose. You once met a knight whose mount was more accustomed to boudoirs than battlefields. A palfrey with a custom hoof massage routine and 3 different bridle options depending on weather. The knight still placed 3rd, and yet, as the tournament drags on, you can't help but notice a truth that sits somewhere between the silk and the scars. Horses are what you make of them. Some were warriors, some were actors, some were symbols, props, mirrors. Some were none of those things. Just horses, really. Slightly confused about why their tails smell like verbena and why everyone is staring at them. You watch one such creature now, a stately gelding whose rider has clearly split the difference. The caparison is embroidered but mud-stained, the armor polished but dented. The plume on the helmet is drooping. It's glorious and silly and honest. You find yourself smiling. Because in the end, the line between warhorse and pageant pony is more of a swirl, an elegant, awkward, hoof-clopping swirl of ambition, insecurity, spectacle, and genuine love for the animal beneath all the ruffles. And you start to suspect that maybe, just maybe, if given the chance, you'd drape your own horse in blue velvet, braid in a few daisy chains, and stride into the field, not to win, but to be seen. That's what half these knights are doing anyway, fighting not just for glory, but for memory, for eyes on their colors, for whispers in the crowd, for one perfect moment where they and their rhinestone-draped, feather-helmeted, silk-laced steeds become the stuff of bedtime stories. The sun begins to droop like a sleepy eyelid, casting syrupy shadows across the tournament field. The air thickens with a blend of trampled grass, melted wax, and the faint perfume of horses who've had a very long day. You loosen your belt just a notch and lean against the fence, sensing that the battle, or perhaps the ballet, is winding down. But of course, no medieval display of ego is truly over until the after-party parade of caparisons. It's not officially announced. No trumpets, no heralds shouting Latin names you can't pronounce. Instead, it begins with the sound of jingling, soft at first, like someone shaking a coin purse far away. Then louder, a rhythm, dozens of rhythms. One by one, the knights return, not to fight, but to glide. Their horses walk in deliberate, exaggerated circles around the now quiet tilt yard. What earlier resembled a battlefield now transforms into a catwalk. And oh, the horses know it. You watch as a stallion clad in layers of embroidered silk steps forward, neck arched, hooves placed with theatrical precision. His caparison is dyed with crushed beetroot, resulting in a red so rich it looks edible. Gold threading shimmers in waves as he moves, catching the firelight from nearby torches. On his flank is an embroidered goose wearing a crown, whatever that's supposed to mean. Historians still debate whether it was a family crest or just a personal joke. Behind him trots a gray mare, smaller, but no less radiant. Her garments are of pale green damask, with tiny silver stars stitched so densely across her back, it looks like someone spilled the Milky Way over her spine. She has matching reins. Yes, matching reins. And someone has somehow managed to plait her tail into a braid that would make any noble woman cry from envy. And the riders? They're doing their best to look noble and aloof, but you spot one knight adjusting his hat too many times, trying to make sure it's tilted just right. Another keeps glancing at the crowd, hoping someone notices his feathered boots. You raise an eyebrow. Feathered boots. Still, this is what everyone stayed for. The fights were fun. The jousting was dangerous. But this is what people remember. The parade. The gentle, gleaming circling of high-born beasts wrapped in absurd beauty. You chuckle to yourself, thinking how some of these horses are now more dressed than their knights. One destrier has layered caparisons. Yes, layered. Silk over velvet, velvet over padded brocade. It's wearing more garments than you packed for the week. The poor thing glistens like a birthday cake in moonlight, complete with frosting-colored embroidery and tassels swinging like cherries. As the procession continues, a sort of choreography unfolds. Horses step in synchronized rhythm, encouraged by subtle cues from their riders. Capes billow, bells jingle, and from a distance, it might just look like a moving tapestry come to life. Some grooms light lanterns now, placing them strategically around the field. The light dances off the embroidery, turning threads into flames. One knight's mount glows violet and gold, while another shimmers like fish scales dipped in moonlight. A unicorn isn't out of place here. You start half believing one might actually appear, horn and all. And as each horse passes, you pick up on a detail that escaped notice earlier. A sapphire dangling from a halter, a sewn-in poem along a horse's flank, a caparison lined with tiny bells that ring like laughter. One knight even had his motto, "Why not be fabulous?" stitched in old French across his horse's rear. You spot a child at the edge of the crowd, eyes wide, clutching a wooden hobby horse draped in what's clearly a stolen kitchen towel. She's mouthing the names of each knight and mimicking their waves. You suspect half of the spectators are here just for this? The dream, the drama, the absurdity of horses dressed like pastries. There's a gentle murmur beside you. Two old women, wrapped in shawls, are debating which horse was best dressed. The one in teal with the owl. No, the one with the pearl-studded rump. Pearls fall off, Agnes. Don't be ridiculous. You smile again, because this moment of communal silliness, of shared awe, of complete surrender to spectacle, is what these knights secretly crave. It's less about winning the joust, more about winning the afterglow. One knight clearly takes it too far. His horse is draped in mirrors, tiny ones, hundreds. He rides through the torchlight like a walking disco ball. The crowd gasps, then giggles, then breaks into full-on applause. You squint to avoid going blind. And somewhere, probably in the corner of the stands, a friar sighs deeply and crosses himself. You notice the squires trailing behind, some holding spare veils in case of wind, others holding embroidered fans for the horse's comfort. One poor boy trips on a sequin and nearly takes down a 300-pound gelding. Eventually, the parade begins to wind down. The riders bow their heads. The horses slow their steps. The music fades to a few distant flutes and a single drum played so softly it could be your heartbeat. The last horse, a coal-black mare dressed only in silk with no embroidery, stops in the middle of the field. Her rider lifts a hand in thanks, and the crowd, enraptured, offers gentle, sleepy applause. And then, silence. The parade is over. The riders guide their over-adorned mounts back to the stables, some removing feathers as they go, others tossing sequins to eager children. A few horses sneeze, clearly not fans of lavender pomade. You watch one gently nudge its knight in the ribs, perhaps in protest. Never again, Gerald. The field, once filled with colors and movement, is left with soft hoofprints in the dirt and the scent of jasmine, sweat, and toasted oats. You stretch, limbs stiff from watching beauty become performance. And as you stand, brushing grass from your cloak, you realize something simple. It wasn't just about pageantry. It was about being seen. Knights, horses, children, onlookers. Everyone here wanted to be part of something dazzling, if only for a moment. And in that shimmering parade of embroidered myths and moonlit creatures, they were. The crowds have melted away, like candle wax left too close to the fire. The torches around the jousting yard flicker lower now, sputtering into cinders. And you, well, you've stayed until the end. Of course you have. You always do. You lead your horse slowly along the path back to your tent, but tonight you don't feel like stopping there. Instead, you keep walking. The chill of night air wraps around your ankles, and your horse's breath puffs like slow smoke in the dark. It's quiet now. Even the nobles have stopped bragging. Even the squires have stopped tripping. Out past the final flags and empty food stalls, you turn down a narrow trail, one the servants use mostly. It leads away from the pageantry, away from the sequins and silk, away from the armored egos. The hoofbeats are softer here. Grass muffles the rhythm. You pass an abandoned flower garland half buried in the dirt. The petals are wilted now, but still pretty. You drape it over your saddle horn. Your horse doesn't object. Maybe she's just too tired to care. Or maybe she secretly enjoys it. She did, after all, get a lot of compliments today. Ahead, the path opens to a small pond, its surface smooth as spilled ink. The moon hangs low and heavy in the sky, reflected perfectly on the water's glassy skin. Fireflies hover like faint candle embers, and the reeds rustle in the lazy evening wind. You stop and dismount, letting your feet sink into the cool, damp grass. Your horse dips her head to drink, the ripples breaking the pond's mirror just enough to turn your reflection into something dreamlike. Your armor catches the moonlight in pale, tired gleams. The feathers from earlier are gone now. Left behind, or perhaps gifted to a child who needed a little bit of magic. You run a hand along your horse's flank, fingers brushing the rhinestoned bridle you almost didn't splurge on. It glitters faintly even now, though one of the stones has definitely fallen off, probably during the after parade when she sneezed at Lord Reynard's overly perfumed gelding. You both stand there for a while, not thinking, not planning, just existing, just breathing. Your horse flicks an ear. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots once as if to say, "Well done." And you think, it's absurd, all of it. The comparisons, the velvet, the pomaded manes and hoof lacquer, the painted symbols of frogs, suns, and soup ladles. But somehow, tonight, it all felt worth it. For the parade, for the stares, for that one kid who gasped when you trotted by, for the whisper of fabric in the wind and the way your horse glowed like mooncake frosting under torchlight. And maybe, deep down, the other nights feel the same. They won't admit it, of course. Tomorrow they'll talk about glory and honor and some nonsense about bloodlines. But tonight, they were walking chandeliers on hooves, parading for the sheer joy of looking magnificent. You smile at your reflection. It smiles back, a little crooked, a little sleepy. Then your horse huffs, impatient now. You get the message. You mount again, slow and careful, the saddle creaking softly under your weight. You turn back toward camp, where the fires are low and the snores are already echoing between tents. The journey back is quiet, gentle. You take it slow. Your cape flutters faintly behind you, and your horse's decorated bridle clicks with each step. The night has folded over the world like a soft wool blanket, tucking every ridiculous knight and rhinestoned pony into dreams of silk and splendor. And you, too, begin to drift in the saddle. You're half asleep before you reach the gate. You murmur something nonsensical to your horse, and she snorts like she understands. Maybe she does. Maybe she always did. You lean forward and whisper, "Good girl." And in the hush of the moon and the rustle of the wind, your horse carries you home. And now, everything grows quieter. The torches are out. The sequins have settled. The horses sleep in their stalls. still faintly scented with rosewater and summer hay. The nights, once blazing with vanity, now snore softly under woolen blankets, their dreams stitched with plum-colored silks and tiny golden bells. The field is empty. Only the stars remain, blinking gently above the faded banners, like they too have seen 1,000 parades come and go. You picture your horse, no longer adorned, no longer posed, just grazing peacefully in a quiet paddock, her mane undone, her eyes half closed. There's no pressure now, no need to sparkle or prance, just stillness, just night. And you've earned your rest too. You've wandered through a world of velvet caparisons and embroidered moon geese, of perfume-spritzed warhorses and sequined showdowns. It was silly and strange and beautiful in all the right ways. So now, with your eyes fluttering closed and your breath evening out, let your thoughts drift like silk banners in a slow wind. Let go of the sparkle. Let go of the clatter. Let yourself become quiet. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you need to be. Sleep comes gently, like a feather settling on your chest. Let it stay. Let it stay. Let it stay.